Okay, and here we are. It is episode 64.
Yes. I was sick the last time, so I had to kind of push this one a week. I had what was either a cold or a seasonal allergy, and I'm still kind of getting rid of the residual cough, but I'm much better.
We talked about it. Glad you're feeling better. We talked about it and figured having you coughing and sort of, croaky throat and the thing probably wouldn't work very well in the episode, so we decided to delay it for a week.
Exactly. Yeah, it just wasn't a good time for me to do it, but I am better, and here we are. So I think we want to kind of lead off on something that's more pertinent, I think. So
Right.
I was, I was looking at Twitter feed and I was seeing, Charlie Kirk actually being shot. And it's like, this is what it's come to. This is my,
Yes.
and I was really hoping that maybe there's like a sliver of a chance that he'll be okay because it didn't say that he was dead on the spot, right? It didn't. There wasn't any confirmation until Trump himself broke the news. So. And I just remember feeling a lot of apprehension for the future, to be sure. It's
Mm.
like, I think we can no longer afford not to watch our back anymore. If we,
Yeah, I was just going to say, first off, what an awful way to go to being shot in the neck, and he must have bled out, and it would have been awful, and it would
right.
have been very bloody, and yeah, horrible. And of course, he's got a young family. He's got a 3-year-old little daughter, and apparently, from what, at least as of a few days ago, she doesn't actually know he's dead. She's just been told he's away, so
Uh,
it's just awful, awful stuff.
well,
Yep. So
exactly.
yeah, that's the personal aspect, but there's also political violence. Yes.
Mhm. Right. So I wanted to lead off on this one instead of kind of holding it off for later in the episode because I kind of want to make something clear about this. I'm not going to sugarcoat the opinions I've had of him on the past, right? I'm not going to rescind them or anything like that. But at the end of the day, it was a more, a comment on his ideas. And, we may think his ideas are great or bad, Such is the marketplace of ideas. And oftentimes, our criticisms, especially coming from someone like me, can be of a more of a harsher nature. But and I've had that on my channel. I want to make this clear because I've had a video kind of criticizing Charlie in the past in this matter. So I'm not going to pretend that didn't happen. I'm just saying this for the sake of transparency. But no one should die for this, and
Yeah.
and the more I kind of looked into uh, what Charlie Kirk's positions are and the kind of person he was, I kind of wish I kind of gotten a chance to kind of read up on him better. Uh, but uh, but it's a little too late for me to kind of edit my words and so forth. I'm uh, just saying that you know we had our opinions about him, but right now, I'm going to be toning it down for now. He did not deserve what happened to him, and and I think there was more about him that I wish I would have known. And I think uh, if I'm stumbling on my words here, it's just kind of hard to kind of gather thoughts and kind of come get this across clearly. But I hope my point is understood here. It's like, nothing what I thought about Kirk uh, would would is any excuse for celebrating his death or cheering on or any nonsense as that that absolute unhingedness. It's it's wrong, plain and simple. And
Uh,
yeah,
I just want to say 100%. So we actually haven't talked about Charlie Kirk before, a little bit of preparation just before
you know,
this recording. Interestingly enough, though, we'd come to pretty similar conclusions to the extent that he'd been on my radar, and I'd sort of thought about him. I'd actually kind of labeled him as gynocentric. That's where I, based on his previous comments and so forth. So yes, he'd said some things that I strongly disagreed with, right?
Right.
But I think it's very, very important to
Hmm.
say yes that I'm not happy about any hearing about
Hmm.
anybody dying.
Right.
It's awful, as I said, the way he died too. But and this of course is really political violence as well, and that's very, very worrying as well. But it doesn't matter who they are. You know, what we should be doing is talking and presenting ideas
Hmm.
and rebutting ideas and so forth. Violence has no place in modern politics, and it's very worrying how it's really reappearing in Western politics in a way that perhaps we haven't seen in a very, very long time, certainly in the modern era. So very concerning. Um, yeah, I think that, as I said, that his positions were something that I didn't necessarily agree with. But I guess, yeah. Did you have any further?
Well, and more I discovered here, there are great things about him that that I should be able to mention. But the thing is, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what kind of opinions they are. I'm not going to like him more or be sad for him more or less because of any of those positions. It's kind of beside the point. And
It is true. He had certainly a broader range of opinions that perhaps
exactly,
that I
yeah.
had realised exactly,
Hmm.
and that's what I was
Right.
going to say about in relation to people cheering his death. I've seen a lot of people, a lot of women, and a small number of men. That's been my observation, cheering his death and being very happy about it, and I find that absolutely appalling. As I said, I don't cheer anybody's death.
Hmm.
Especially not someone who's got a young family and so forth, and his
Yeah.
children are going to have to grow up without him.
Hmm.
Uh, but yes, that's right. He did have quite a number of opinions. Interestingly enough,
Hmm.
despite being I shouldn't really say despite actually, he's a strong Christian. He was actually advocating for decriminalization of homosexuality around the
Hmm.
world. So yeah,
Oh, I understand he spoke with gay couples in a
hmm.
very incredibly civil manner and so forth.
Mm, exactly. And he took from Christianity, I'm not myself not a Christian, but he took from Christianity that aspect of tolerance, which is something that I'm very happy to hear that he was taking
Yeah.
that, and I think it's something we should see more of.
Yeah, sure.
But yeah, he was, as you say, he would actually
Mhm.
take it from a viewpoint of tolerance, and he was actually working to try to help people around the world in that
Hmm.
regard.
Yeah,
So
right. Yeah, so, you know, I can't change what I've said before, but
nor should you.
and
No.
right, and here's the thing, like on my channel and on X or whoever, I've lambasted all kinds of people, and I don't want him dead, you know. I
No.
want him to come around and talk, maybe.
Mm.
Um, And yeah, I sometimes get a bit insulting, but it's like it's one of those things that we all do it, kind of, so it's but at the end of the day, it's you know uh, a contest of ideas, and
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, I saw many claims going around, unsourced claims about things he'd said and so forth, and I just took it upon myself to start researching some of them. Of course, I do a lot of that sort of research, and I just couldn't find sources for essentially any of the really common ones that are going around. There was all
yeah.
sorts of nonsense that was being portrayed, and it's just ridiculous. I mean, we're not seeing people. Um, Having much regard for the need to verify the information that they're spreading around.
Hmm.
I mean,
Exactly.
that's no surprise in the modern era, I suppose, but it's very unfortunate, particularly in this case, where, interestingly enough, too, and it seemed to be after he died, a lot of this started to appear, right? So at the point at which he can no longer defend himself,
Hmm.
we start
Exactly.
seeing these false claims circulating widely.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. I mean. That's the gist of what I wanted to kind of say, and
Mm.
I just wanted to kind of get that across because we are hosting this on my channel right at the moment, and so there's no, I just wanted to clear the air on that one. I just felt like I needed to.
Yeah. So I guess yes. In summary, well, certainly I think it's fair to say both of us we disagreed with some things he said, agreed with other things he said, perhaps, and but more importantly, he had every right to say them and not suffer violence, and
Mhm.
he has suffered violence. Also, I did want to make one comment about the alleged shooter. I did see a few reports after the alleged shooter, after I think it was the FBI arrested this individual. There were the claims that this person was a Republican and so forth. No, the person he comes from a Republican family in Utah, but he himself is apparently seems to be associated with Antifa.
Mhm.
And I stress again, yes, this is currently the alleged shooter. But yes, there did seem to be some association with Antifa. So
And
this is,
I think this person's trans relationship is cooperative with the FBI at this point, I think.
Mhm.
So, uh, so yeah, I'm pretty sure uh, this is the person to be sure. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah,
But yes, no doubt, there will obviously be a court case and the jury will come to some determination in time.
right.
So
Hmm.
yes, I'm particularly strict on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Uh, and Okay, so next one I want to talk. I've got one item I did want to talk about.
Hmm.
Yeah, the March for Australia. Now this is in the singular. In actual fact, it was a series of marches for Australia. So this was organised 2 or 3 weeks ago. I actually don't have the date to hand, but it was 2 or 3 weeks ago on a weekend, and there were marches in many cities around Australia, most of the capital cities. And essentially, it's what I really want to talk about is uh, the marches and the media response to the marches. Now, a gentleman I know from Men's Rights Sydney has actually attended one of the marches, and he's actually written an interesting piece. And I actually have asked him if I could publish it on A Voice for Men, but I haven't heard back from him yet. But he said he had some trepidation about going. He attended the Sydney March. He said he had some concerns before he went there. And he decided that if he started hearing, white nationalist slogans coming from the stage, he'd back off, right? And he'd leave. Okay. He himself, as it happens to be, is Ashkenazi Jewish, and his family actually lives under communism in Eastern Europe, and so eventually later migrated to Australia. And he's certainly got. I think don't think he personally has experience with that, but he's certainly his family, close family members, have personal experience living under communism. And anyway, so he went along and saw this, as he wrote an interesting piece. But from what he's written and from what others have written, it's very much seems to me that the March for Australia was about immigration. That's no secret. That was the stated purpose. But what it was really about was for most people that were there, there were some, we do know, there were some white nationalists there, okay, but they were very small in number. There were some people who argued for a complete abolition of immigration, right? But the overwhelming viewpoint for people who attended the marches, it seems very clear, is that what they want to do is essentially turn down immigration. Because what's happened is, and this has happened I don't know about the United States, but it's happened in Australia and Canada and probably other countries as well. Australia has a kind of a target for population that's broadly got bipartisan support. About, by 2050 there'll be 40 million people, and by 2080 there'll be 60 million, or whatever it happens to be. Okay, and they've been basing the immigration numbers on these targets, and they've been looking to build the population by a certain amount. And then, of course, the pandemic happened, and Australia closed the borders. Nice thing about being surrounded by water, I suppose, you can do that.
Yeah.
Closed the borders, immigration massively cut down, or went to virtually zero.
Mhm.
Canada, similar situation. So, but in both cases, that meant that they were falling short of targets. Okay. So, in the years after the pandemic, they turned up immigration to 11 to try to catch up to the targets.
Mhm.
Okay. What's happened is in both countries, this has caused problems. It's meant that housing demand has massively outstripped supply as hundreds of thousands of people pouring into the country. I think so. In case of a country like Australia with 25 million people, hundreds of thousands of people a year is a huge number. Uh, House prices have gone up. They're already going up. House prices have gone up. Rentals have become much more difficult to get. So there's all these knock-on effects. So a lot of people, and I said Canada's very similar, a lot of people have been saying, okay, let's turn down immigration, let the housing market catch up, and so forth. And that was a lot of what this was about. And I personally support that argument that I'm actually quite pro-immigration, right? But and I'm also rather a bit of a pragmatist when it comes to immigration. The reality is Western countries aren't having enough children, right? Well, if you're not going to have enough children, it doesn't matter whether you like immigration or not. You're pretty much going to need it. So your population is going to age out. So we need immigration. Australia and the other wealthy countries bring in a lot of skilled workers, so the countries have actually benefited greatly from it. Obviously, you want a functioning immigration program. There, you can still have an immigration program and get it wrong, but as long as your immigration program is working well, I think it's very much a benefit to the country.
Mhm.
But I would have favoured them, say, increasing immigration over 10 or 20 years, not trying to do it in 3 or 4 to catch up the numbers. And that's pretty much what they tried to
Right.
do. Of course, this massive blowout, as I said, and we don't have enough skilled tradespeople to build houses fast enough to match the numbers and so forth. So that's what a lot of this was about. People just going on and saying they wanted more rational numbers for immigration. But
Mhm.
the media portrayal has been absolutely terrible, absolutely abysmal. It's been all about white nationalism and so forth. The media didn't even try to provide, mainstream media didn't even try to provide a balanced view. And I think to a large degree, a lot of people have seen through it. And I think the mainstream media have probably damaged their own reputation over this.
Mhm.
But anyway, I just wanted to talk because you look at any of the mainstream articles on these things, you believe there are a bunch of Nazis walking down the street, right? Tens of
Right.
thousands of Nazis or something.
Mhm.
No. So while I didn't attend them, I know people who did, and I've looked at a wide variety of sources, and it seems that very much wasn't the case. There were a small number of people like that, but there were a
Mhm.
much larger number of people who were just legitimately concerned about immigration being a little too high or being, far too high. So
Mhm.
anyway. So yeah, interesting. As I said to his friend's discussion, especially with his particular background,
Mhm.
uh, and yeah, I think that's. Oh yes, I do have a few more points on it. Yeah. So
Okay, sure.
yes, yeah. So the Prime Minister of Australia, Anthony Albanese, he said that some of the attendees were well-meaning. Okay.
Okay.
And even that caused a backlash in the governing party in Australia, the Australian Labor Party. So even saying that some of the attendees were well-meaning was outside the scope of what
Mm.
the mainstream media and even the possible politicians were prepared to accept.
Right.
Um, yeah. So anyway, yes, I do think that this has been quite a seminal moment in Australia in that I think it's really revealed uh, for most people the biases that are in the mainstream media.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's all I guess I had to say on
Yeah.
the much for Australia.
Uh, yeah. Because you were mentioning that it's the skilled workers that really make the best quality of any given immigration and so forth. But I
Absolutely.
suppose when it boils down to it, it also comes down to what kind of equivalent values one is actually bringing, or
Mhm.
is I don't want to say indoctrinated because that's a bit of a different connotation, but someone who is willing to adapt
Sim
and assimilate,
Assimilate. Yeah.
assimilate into the values of a given area. I think that's the large overarching problem in any given refugee or immigration situation is that
Yes.
they're bringing bad anti-individual rights type values uh, in with them from where they come from, um, and basically kind of invoking their own rights where it's convenient. It's kind of a vast consequence of the indoctrination of social justice ideology, in my opinion. It's kind of if that makes sense.
Yeah, that is a really good point, actually. That's right. And the concept of multiculturalism, I think a lot of people don't realize the concept of multiculturalism essentially arose in the 70s. The idea is that people would migrate to a Western country, they would maintain their original culture and essentially not assimilate, and there'd be a bunch of
Hmm.
cultures that would live side by side. And I think that works fine as long as all of those cultures have the concept of tolerance of other cultures within them. But if you've got a situation where that isn't the case, then yes, I think it is important that people recognise things like the rule of law and
Hmm.
the other concepts that underpin Western democracies.
Hmm.
And are willing to adopt those sort of principles. You can still have your own culture, obviously, and in fact, many of the people I know who have been, say, second generation. It's interesting to watch the sort of different generations, and people who are second generation. They're very much a mixture of the two cultures, where they have a cultural background, might be from the
Hmm.
Middle East or wherever it happens to be.
Right.
And I've known a lot of people from Iran, for example, first
Hmm.
generation, second generation. But then they go to the school system here, and they see the Western way, or the Western approach as well. And it really is interesting. I actually predicted something, by the way, about
Hmm.
as an aside. I actually predicted something about Asian takeout restaurants in Australia, and it turned
Yeah.
out to be true. Okay,
Yeah.
so in the 70s and 80s, there was Australia took in a lot of Vietnamese refugees from the Vietnam War, for example, and other groups of refugees. A lot of Lebanese Christians came here as well, but there were quite a lot of restaurants, say into up to the 90s, right?
Hmm.
Where and I love these restaurants. There's a this I'm really getting off track here, but there's something called the plastic chair test. I don't know if you've ever heard of that,
I don't
right?
think so.
But so it mainly applies to things like Chinese restaurants and so forth. The best food can be found if there are if the establishment has plastic chairs.
Hmm.
The hypothesis is that the cheap and cheerful place with the very cheap decor often has probably the most authentic food and the most delicious food. So anyway,
Yeah.
but a phenomenon that I did observe in, say, the 80s and 90s was that a lot of the proprietors of these places kind of had very limited English and so forth. So I would go to these places, I used to go all the time, order from the menu and have some delicious meal. But if you tried varying the menu at all, you didn't get a lot of success, right? Because they often had sort of limited English. I predicted that their children would go to school in Australia, and within 20 years, these same restaurants would exist and they'd all be speaking English fluently, and the problem would solve itself. And that's exactly what happened as it happened. So now
Gotcha.
you can go to these restaurants, and it's the kids of the original proprietors, right? And they've grown up here and gone to school here, and their English is this is their almost probably their first language. So anyway, I
Exactly.
just thought that was
Hmm.
interesting. That I used to encounter this a lot in the 90s. That there were these great places. They were fabulous, except the proprietors spoke almost no English, and you just
Hmm.
had to just point to the menu, and you got these delicious meals. But yeah, as I said, later on they yeah uh, the next generation, it was all good. So anyway, getting back to assimilation into the culture. So I've known many people from many different parts of the world here in Australia where this has happened, and the second generation, a lot of them have gone to school in the mainstream school system, and they've sort of, I guess, a combination, a hybrid of the two cultures. There are some groups perhaps where that isn't the case.
Hmm.
We do have a problem here, and I think it's true in all Western countries, where there have been primarily from China, it's my sense, but probably not only from China, where there have been quite a lot of illegal workers who have managed to get into the country, and they they're operating under the books, usually at minimum pay, and in some cases slave labor, almost slave labor conditions, and they will stay in their own group and often don't have the language skills, and that of course keeps those people from seeking help too. So they will often be working illegally in their own communities, very minimal pay, and be unable to essentially escape those conditions. They usually come with a lot of them have some suspicion of the police, so they're not necessarily going to go to the police either. And they are there as well, and there's this underclass almost. And I think the government here has done quite a lot to try to correct that, because it's no good for those people either. But that's something that has occurred. Um, but getting back to assimilation,
Yes.
yeah. So my one concern I have is that, and I think this is true in all Western countries, the government hasn't done enough to help people assimilate either.
Oh, you're right.
You,
Yeah.
yeah, you have people coming from war-torn countries. Sorry, do you want to jump in, by the way? Because I've been talking a
No,
long
no, no,
time.
no. That's like a really
No,
strong
yeah,
point is
yeah,
what you're,
yeah.
and I have more on that once you're done. So,
Oh, great. Yeah. So, and this is something I've observed. Now, they will come from, in some places, a war-torn part of the world. As I said, Australia in the 1970s brought in a lot of Vietnamese, people from South Vietnam primarily, allies of Australia and the other countries that were fighting the Vietnam War. They were repatriated, well, not repatriated, they were brought into Australia as refugees. Christian Lebanese was another classic example. They're
yeah.
both cases where the countries have been at war.
Hmm.
More recently, there have been Sudanese refugees that have come in and so forth. And it seems to me that for reasons that appear to be a result of political correctness, uh, they bring these people in and they kind of just, it seems like and I'm happy to be corrected on this, but it seems to me like they kind of push them out the door into the community, give them a bit of money or whatever, maybe sign them up for English language classes and say, good luck as they close the door. And that's pretty much the end of it, right? And if you're coming from a part of the world that's been war torn, or the rule of law is not as strong, or the police are corrupt, right? You really should be explaining these things to the people to say, no, you can't, go talk to the police here. We have mechanisms. If you're not happy with the police, we have a complaints process, all this sort of
Yes.
thing. And explain, it seems to me that they don't explain this sort of thing to people coming into the country, and they just push them out the door. And I feel to me like it seems to me like it's for reasons of political correctness. That's my sense
Oh, yeah.
that they yeah. So they don't want to impose a Western culture on them, but in actual
Hmm.
fact, you're asking them to live in a Western country and you're not explaining the rules to them, right?
Hmm.
And the reason I mentioned Sudan in particular, right, and I do stress that this is absolutely not across the board. I myself know Sudanese Australians who are, law-abiding citizens and so forth, right, including some people who've had some terrible, terrible problems in their being subjected to violence and so forth back in Sudan, who came here and and just did well and worked hard and established themselves, right? But at the same time, there do seem to be problems in certain communities, in particular Sudan. One of the cities in Australia, Melbourne, seems to have an ongoing problem with Sudanese gangs fighting, and it's actually reached the point now where in the state of Australia they're machetes, banning
Okay.
machetes. Okay. And they're having a machete hand-in process. So never mind banning firearms, they're banning machetes. The reason is
Hmm.
because there have been some of these gangs have used machetes to fight each other, right? But as we all know, there are perfectly legitimate uses for machetes. So
Exactly.
right, and not just in country areas. If you want to hack something down in your backyard, you might want to use a machete. So
Hmm.
in what sort of process are they going? It sounds to me, I don't live in that state, but it seems like they're actually being really strict about it. It may be quite difficult to get machetes in the future in Victoria. So uh, these sort of things are now reflecting on the entire community or limiting the entire community. And it seems to me that they could have done a better job of helping these people to assimilate into Australian culture and talking about how impressing upon them that violence that is seen very differently here than perhaps it was in a homeland that was war torn. So,
Right.
and I do feel that the government hasn't done enough for them. Anyway, so I've talked at length on that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's this idea of kind of just, do what you want here, and nobody can tell you what to do, but we're not going to say anything if you decide to tell them how to bow to your sort of wishes. That's kind of the situation that's playing out right now in just about any given country. That the mass immigration and the refugee situation is happening. It's it should be incredibly concerning, but we're not allowed to be concerned about this sort of thing because that is in itself the not politically correct. It's they'll call it Nazi, of course, and they'll try and kill us for it.
Mhm. I find it interesting actually that Japan of course, has had an increase. I believe there's a political party which is more anti-immigration, and they did well in the recent election. And
Yeah.
I think even though immigration is only a relatively small proportion of the population in Japan compared to Western countries, I think about 3% or something, they're watching the Western countries with interest, seeing a bunch of problems and thinking we don't want those problems here.
All right.
And yeah, and I do think there is the other advanced economies outside the West are watching what's going on and are quite concerned. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Right. Yeah,
So that was the
it's
March for
yeah.
Australia and
Yeah.
immigration. Anyway, go on.
I'm sorry?
Oh, that said that was this the March for Australia and immigration.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so we have a great man of history.
Exactly. So I've picked Alfred the Great.
Okay.
So before each of these recordings, I have a bit of think about who I want the great man of history to be, and I just wanted something a bit different. I've done a few scientists and a few mathematicians and so forth, and
All right.
yes, they've done some amazing stuff in advancing the world and so forth. But I wanted to go for an historical figure. I've done Julius Caesar before, I think. I wanted to go for another historical figure, and I was looking at different parts of the world. And I am in future episodes. There will be some other interesting characters from different parts of the world who I will be talking about. But I ended up with an English guy today. It wasn't what I originally
Okay.
started with. I was looking at Africa and I was looking at Asia and I was thinking, who am I going to go for? And this guy stuck out, so I'm going to go with him for today.
Sure.
So Alfred the Great, for those who don't know, Alfred the Great. So he was King of Wessex. Now, for those who don't know, England was historically divided into seven kingdoms. Before it was the Kingdom of England, there were seven kingdoms. Now, it's interestingly enough, the number wasn't always seven. And this goes back, I guess, probably to the period after the Romans and so forth. But historically, they like to say there were seven kingdoms. They called it the Heptarchy. So,
Yeah.
which kind of means seven kingdoms, right? They weren't all equal though, and at one point, I think the Kingdom of Mercia was the most powerful, but for quite a long time, the Kingdom of Wessex was the most powerful. That, by the way, means West Saxons, where it comes from.
Sure.
So Alfred the Great was king of Wessex. He was actually never meant to be king. He was the youngest son of the previous king, and he had, I think, three older brothers. And one by one, they all died. And then next thing you know, Alfred is king. And I said, I don't think anybody really expected that to be the case, but he turned out to be an absolutely fantastic king. So before I go and talk about all the things he did, though, on top of everything else, he had a lifelong health condition. In fact, a contemporary detailed his symptoms, and doctors have tried to diagnose him, as they do sometimes with historical figures, and they think he had Crohn's disease. That's the most likely
Oh,
condition, which of course is a severe bowel condition. I think it involves inflammation of the bowel, quite painful, and also, and I think people that have a lot of pain in the stomach and the bowel and all sorts of issues. So the poor guy who had this condition was like it's genetic and it's lifelong, and in his era there was no way to treat it. He believed that God had cursed him with this. Maybe the curse isn't quite the right word, but God had put this upon him to kind of keep him, rein him in as a king. That's what he believed. So he recognized he was a smart guy. He realized that he was very powerful, as it turned out, being a king and expanding his kingdom, as I'll go on to talk about. And he believed that God sort of gave this to him to sort of, keep him in check, I guess his ego in check, I suppose. So anyway, but he had a reputation for being learned, merciful, and level-headed. It's occasionally, I'm not a great fan of monarchies, and by that I mean I'm not a fan of monarchies at all. There've been lots of terrible monarchs, but every once in a while there's been a good monarch.
yeah.
Just by luck, just by random chance, I suppose you're going to get a good monarch, and he was one of these good monarchs. He really was. He really did manage his kingdom very well. So he established a court school, and what he would do is his own children went there, the children of nobles went there, and he would also pay for children of some commoners to go there, in particular sons of commoners to go there. It was very selective, but
Mhm.
if a particularly bright boy was observed in his kingdom, he would actually have that child brought into the capital and put him in the school. I guess it was a boarding school, effectively, and he would be educated there. And this had the interesting effect that these young men, they were educated in Latin and English, and a wide variety of other areas for the time. they ended up with a great deal of loyalty to him personally because he had educated them, right, and given them this great future. And he would then employ them in his government. And they became the backbone of the government of the Kingdom of Wessex, which gave Wessex this much better, much more stable administrative structure than essentially anyone else in Europe at the time. Through a series of wars that happened at the time. For those who don't know, Danes were controlling much of England at the time. There was a bit of back and forth. He didn't win every battle. Parts of Wessex were occupied for a while, but eventually, through a combination of alliances with the other kings in England and through defeating the Danes, he was essentially able to become what amounted to King of England. And all the other kings kind of, admitted that they were beneath him in the structure, and at that point it's pretty much considered to be a single kingdom. I think the actual unification of the kingdom took a while, but from that point it's essentially acting as a single country. So what's interesting about this is one of the many interesting things is that centuries later, I should say, when William the Conqueror conquered England in 1066, he actually left the administration of England in place because it was superior to anything that they had in France where he'd come from. So it showed that even by 1066, the administration of the kingdom was still superior. So I don't think I mentioned it before, but he was King of Wessex from 871 to 886, and then
Yep.
King of England from 886 to 899, I believe it was. So
Okay.
um, anyway, yes. So the reason I have picked him in particular is because I think that because of the events that happened subsequently, he's really had an influence that's lasted until the present day. He ruled Wessex, which became the King of England, which of course became part of Britain, which became the part of the United Kingdom, which of course led the British Empire, which had a huge impact in the entire world. And it seems that a lot of the structure that allowed England to dominate later on, because the effective administration that they had really early on, and not just from Alfred, there are a few other kings that did good things too, but I think the fact that he established that administration, which they built on later on, which ultimately helped the British Empire to function the way it did, I think allowed it to be the dominant force that it was. So he's had a massive influence on the world. Of course, lots of people will say that the influence of the British Empire was rather negative, uh, but I would have to say, compared to some of the other imperial powers of the time, it probably wasn't too bad. If I had to be a subject of a European empire, I'd probably prefer it to the British Empire to the French, Portuguese, or Spanish, who usually treated their subjects quite a bit worse.
Right. Yeah. Makes
Sorry to
sense.
any French, Portuguese, or Spanish listening out there, but that's how I see it.
Hmm.
Yeah. Um, And in fact, I think if you look today, English speaking countries by and large, even the poorest English speaking countries are still kind of mid range
Yeah.
in the world. Yeah, like I think Belize may be the poorest speaking speaking country or something along those lines.
Hmm.
Somewhere in Central America. Anyway, it's uh, they're not too bad versus say the poorest Portuguese speaking or the poorest Spanish speaking or French speaking countries.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of interesting stuff about the. Hopefully, I'm not waffling too much in history, but after the American Revolution, there's an argument that the British gave a lot more home rule to their colonies, and that allowed them to build up better institutions and be better functioning countries when they became independent.
Yes.
So that's one of the suggestions that's been made. Anyway, Alfred the Great. I think he was. I think he well deserves it. He was given the title the Great centuries after his death. Obviously, he didn't call himself that, but I think that shows that he was recognised as a very influential figure.
Right. I agree.
That's all I have on Alfred.
All right. So, now we're going to move on to a bit of viewer feedback here. So we
Oh,
have
cool.
a long time watcher of our channel. I think it's what went by a few usernames here or there, but it's BNK 2442. I think it's like Octavio or something like that. I'm trying to remember his exact name, but yeah. So he commented on um actually a few videos ago.
Okay.
I
So I'm
think
going
it
cold
is.
here because I don't think I saw this one. Sorry, interrupting. Yeah.
Okay, sure, yeah. So this is what a feedback on our episode 61, which was months ago at this point. It's the one where we talked about male child care and the land type test, and Marcel Grossman was our great man of history at the time. Uh, See, this is why I have our titles the way they are, so we can
Very good.
circle back. It's a new thing I've been working on. But anyway, as to
Exactly.
his comment, uh, the part about UBI was kind of cringe. Thanks. Um, there are schools of libertarianism, such as Georgism, that have openings for an UBI in case paying it for a single land value tax. Georgist Australian economist Fred Foldery supported this idea. You may disagree with him, but it is hard to argue that he is not a real libertarian. And for those who really don't know, UBI, Universal Basic Income.
Yes.
Um,
Yes. Do we want to
all,
explain? Do we want to explain
uh,
UBI?
let me get the rest of the comment in
Okay.
because this he had like a quick follow-up to it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Also, there is a long tradition of libertarians talking against police use of excessive force. Radley Balco and William Grigg, for example. So while I don't support BLM, it is simplistic to say that Joe Jorgensen should not be considered a libertarian because of it. While I agree that some gatekeeping is necessary, you are extending your case of it way more than necessary. Talking about me
Yes.
because I did make some opinionated remarks about UBI as well as Joe Jorgensen. So let me go ahead and talk about the UBI part first. So I'm assuming this was where I was talking about Gary Johnson, because
Could,
that's the one. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Rob.
so can I explain UBI just for those
Yeah,
who
yeah.
great, yeah, all
Let's
right,
go
yeah.
ahead and do that
Okay,
first. Yeah.
great. So all right, so UBI, Universal Basic Income, is a concept that essentially everybody who is in a state, it could be citizens or it could be permanent residents as well, or whatever, will receive a certain amount of money every month or whatever from the government, irrespective of how much money they earn or any other considerations beyond being a lawful resident and fulfilling whatever criteria that they would for citizenship or whatever. So the idea is it would completely replace all government programs. So there would be no pensions, there would be no unemployment benefits or anything like that. There would just be this one payment that the computer would automatically deposit into your account every month or whatever it happens to be. And the idea is that the government, well, part of the idea is that the government administration we currently use is quite complex and has lots of rules and consumes resources and so forth. And you can simplify it massively just by having this computer just drop money into everyone's account every month. I'm not passing judgment at all on the UBI at this point, just explaining the concept. Now, there's a related concept. So the key of UBI is you don't have any other programs. And that would be one of the tricks of implementing such a system because politicians being what they would always be pushing back and trying to implement additional programs, which would start to increase the complexity and overheads again, right? A pure UBI system expects that there are no other government programs to give you money, just this one, right? So that would be, and you'd almost have to enshrine it in the Constitution or something to prevent legislators trying to implement additional systems because, oh, we know they would, right? There's a related concept called negative taxation, and where negative taxation, if the government draws a line, and it might be $60,000 or something like that,
Right.
for every dollar above that you earn, you pay tax, a flat tax. For every dollar below the line that you earn, you receive an equivalent amount of money, right? So it might be 30 cents or whatever it is, right? So if you earn zero, you're getting, say, 30% of the 60,000 or whatever it happens to be, right? But if you're earning 200,000, you are paying 30% tax on everything from the 60,000 up. No tax-free threshold, no bans, anything, just flat tax, right?
Mm.
The government sets this number in such a manner as they have sufficient revenue to operate the government. That's the idea. So that's a variation on the UBI concept. I guess, yeah, I just wanted to lay those out so everyone understood what they were. Do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, sure. So. this is one of those things where, I would kind of weigh in the actual position that Gary Johnson, because I was positive I was talking about Gary Johnson's, because um so let me kind of break off just a moment. So the comment kind of comes months after I've said it. So if I have trouble remembering exactly what I said, that kind of factors in because I noticed this user, with all due respect, kind of watches episodes late and then comments on them, which, this is completely understandable, sort of a thing to do because among all the things you could be listening to this world, we could just be a tiny portion of it, and you would find some time, which I'm glad you do find a time, by the way, to listen to our program. It truly does mean a lot. But but the stipulation here is that uh, it might be a while since I've talked about it. So if I don't get exactly what your response is to, then well, sorry about that. But I'm assuming we're talking about Gary Johnson because that's the only person I've kind of really made such a big claim about that when it comes to the UBI thing. Now, what I had in mind at the time when I made that comment was that. Um, this wasn't his second time running for president. And it just seemed to me like he was trying to grasp at any given way to kind of appeal more to the masses because a universal basic income with the best variant of this is just like what Robert said, in which all other programs will be cut. Most still, in my mind, approach UBI from a version in which the programs might still be there because they come from a non-libertarian standpoint. And so in my mind, he was appealing to try and get more of those people in, and in effect, kind of revealing him to be kind of unprincipled. And by that I mean not that he's amoral or anything like that, but he just didn't have any positions of his own to call himself. He was just willing to kind of entertain more. And this was more of an attack on him really being not having ideas of his own as opposed to whether he was consistent in libertarianism or not. So I don't know if him being not a real libertarian in that situation was the right thing to say. Though I do criticize that he didn't have like a stronger foundation. I think that was more where I was going for. And you know, I've already talked about the Charlie Kirk thing where I use kind of stronger language to kind of lambast someone when I'm criticizing their ideas or something like that. Uh, but at the end of the day, it's really a battle about ideas, and I'm just really more hardline about it because I've been a little sick of kind of validating everybody's position. Uh, uh, just to make nice. So I think frank discussions are actually, and respectful discussions are actually much more harsher sounding than they look. Like "you're wrong, you asshole" is actually a very respectful thing to say because it's not walking on eggshells. It's not trying to condescend. Oh, you go have your little pet belief. It's right for you, so it's okay. I don't want to do that. It's just I kind of want to be as honest as I can about it. And when it comes to real X, or like the example here was real libertarianism, I tend to talk a lot about what constitutes real men's issues, men's rights advocacy, and you know like there are certain points, like if they are for male disposability and they somehow call themselves advocates for men, I say they're not an advocate for men on that basis because that is a key uh, uh, criteria. And the big one is male genital mutilation. If you think this
Yeah.
is okay in any idea, I will call you not a real men's advocate if you call yourself a men's rights guy or something like that. Those people are rare, thankfully, but um, but they've cropped up here or there. So So that's just, I'm not going to apologize for the way I approach this sort of things. Maybe nuance will come later, I think, but it's just the way I am. And so if you had anything else, Robert, I'll hear it before I move on to the second part of it when I talk about George Jorgensen.
No, 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 go for it.
Okay, sure. So and the Joe Jorgensen thing, I, so this had to have been when I was talking about uh her trying to attend like that vigil for George Floyd and so forth. And also I think there might have been a mention of her infamous tweet in which we are not only not racist but we are anti-racist, kind of like kind of gathering that social justice sort of edge to it, possibly without her even realizing it. Um, so to the notion that I am extending my case of it way more than necessary, well, I don't know because when we're talking about talking against the excessive use of police force, which is in my mind a cornerstone of libertarian ways of thinking, you know, I didn't see her attend any vigil on white guys that were brutalized by police, which don't really get reported because, contrary to the whole Black Lives Matter thing, the real attitude is white lives don't matter. Is the real kind of attitude in which the police violence sort of thing tends to happen. And so, I'm just not, this was a show in my mind on the part of Joe Jorgensen to appeal to more that sort of thing. And I just think it was a really it was just similar to the Gary Johnson thing. It's kind of like trying to pander to people. And when I say when I attack characters of libertarians, it's more it really is that, like personal constitution as like as a candidate, and not so much about the minutia of philosophical and differences and so forth. It's kind of the way they carry themselves in the public eye is something I'm much more concerned when it comes to any given libertarian candidate. So um, we can bandy this back and forth, right? Like maybe the next set of comments would be that I am being narrow-minded in the way I'm talking about these sort of libertarians, and so this could go ad infinitum. But I I am not going to apologize for the way I talk about this. This is just the way I deal with things. Could I be wrong? I could be. I'm not saying that, I am perfect and that I'm right all the time. But everybody believes they're right all the time when they say their own opinion, right? So, so yeah, that's just my position on that. That's my response to it. I mean, I still am thankful that you are a consistent viewer of this channel, and uh, yeah. Um, Thanks for the comments. It's something to talk about at least. So,
Yeah, no, that's great. I didn't have any further comments. Obviously, that one was really directed at you. So, yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Do we have any other viewer feedback that you want to talk
No
about?
other viewer feedback, as far as I can tell. At least not that I've kind of slated out for.
Yeah,
Yeah. So,
yeah.
but yeah. This is um, it all kind of ties itself together. I think this idea of kind of strong sounding speech and how it could be misconstrued. But whatever it is, um, the whole time I was thinking back to the whole Charlie Kirk situation. It's like, you know, let's we can be as vigorous as we can about dialogue and so forth. So and but um, y- y- it's wrong to kill someone in revenge for for being beaten in an argument, I suppose. If it is that
I guess on the topic of that, political violence, as I said, this is something we're seeing increasingly in the West, and it's got me very much concerned. But there is one comment I haven't said in this episode, and it's usually my response to this actually. So if you engage in some behavior, right, in the political sphere, then you're inviting your opponent to engage in the same behavior. And to all the people who would think that killing their opponents um, is something that they would consider to be, desirable. Maybe they don't want to kill them, but they'd like somebody to kill them, right? Uh, are you so? I'm going to ask these people. I always do. I do ask them. Are you so sure your opponents aren't better at this than you are? If you introduce assassinations and normalize assassinations, this is someone on the far left who's normal helping to normalize an assassination. There was, of course, the assassination attempt on Donald Trump before his second term, right?
yes, right,
Now, what happens? That's the far left. Now, what happens if the far right starts engaging in political assassinations, right?
right,
So, yep. Now, the last time I checked, the some of the far right groups have been pretty effective when they've decided to implement violence. So these people on the far left might just find that they've opened a can of worms by normalising certain behaviour, and they may find their opponents are much better at this than they are.
yeah, right. And to build off that, I think the average um what we call liberal or left people on the left, especially in the United States, they need to kind of reevaluate what really far right actually means because at
Yes.
the end of the day, it doesn't really mean anything. You're just labeling, not you, but
No, no,
these
no, no.
people.
I'll
Um,
clarify that in a moment. Yes.
yeah, yeah, sure. Labeling them far right for anything, anything that's not on your particular ways of indoctrination. Like obviously, not only am I, by their definition, far right, Rob over here is
Yeah.
probably far right, and I think he's more on the left side than myself. I think so.
Yep,
Yeah,
most likely. That's right.
yeah,
So to
right.
clarify, and thank you. This is a good point, actually. So you heard
Mhm,
me say far left and far right in my,
mhm.
a couple of minutes
Yeah,
ago, right? I want to emphasize those are terms I very, very rarely actually use. So you've
mhm,
actually heard of a rare case of me using them because they are overused, ridiculously so,
mhm.
right? Particularly far right at the moment. Um,
Yes,
so as far as I know, nobody in the public sphere has ever called me far right, but I have been called alt-right quite a few times.
yeah.
Um,
I
but
still don't know what that
uh,
means. Yeah.
exactly. So, and I've always said I'm not any sort of right, quite frankly.
Mhm,
I used to call myself left. I don't anymore because I'm too
mhm.
disgusted by what the left has become.
Right.
I would call myself a classical liberal,
Sure. Mhm,
which is something that would generally have been considered to sit centre left. Okay.
mhm. Right.
But where classical liberalism is today, it's hard to say,
Mhm.
but it's
Right.
generally considered fairly centrist. But yes, so I do want to clarify, yeah, and I probably should
Yeah.
have made that point clearer. It's very rare for me to use those terms, and I did use
Mhm.
them this time because I was
Right.
referring specifically to the groups on both ends who are prepared and willing and
Exactly.
able to use violence.
Right.
So when I
Right.
say far right, I mean, you know, Nazis, literal people who adhere to the definition of Nazism or neo-Nazism. And by the way, and while we're on that topic, again, this is not a term. These are not terms I bandy around. A lot of people do
Right.
bandy them around. I do not. Right?
Hmm.
If you hear me talk about a Nazi, I'm talking about somebody who's pretty much adhering to National Socialism in Germany,
Exactly. Yeah.
or trying to resurrect that today. Okay, that's what I would call
Right.
right. So now, on that topic, on a voice for me, I had a go some years ago. Fascism, setting aside Nazism for a moment, fascism is notoriously difficult to define, right? I had a go at defining fascism some years ago, and I ended up the closest I could get was two definitions. They appear on A Voice for Men. I won't necessarily go through them now, but I end up with a narrow definition and a broad definition, and I argue that fascism exists somewhere between those two definitions. So have a look on A Voice for Men. You can see how I define fascism on there in my article.
Right.
But yes, if you ever hear me talking about the far right, I'm talking about people who are probably trying to resurrect a Nazi state. If you hear me use the term Nazi, I'm talking about people who are trying to resurrect National Socialism as it existed in Germany, something along those lines. These are not
Exactly.
terms I bandy around at all. So yes,
Hmm.
it's. I think I'm glad you mentioned that actually, because I did say far right, so far left, and it's very easy for people to gloss over those sort of terms today. No, I
Right.
don't use that terminology very often at all.
Sure. Yeah. And reflecting on how I fall myself, it's like, I probably would uh categorize myself as right by virtue of not being left. But um but the thing is, like, even if I were to do so, I'm very atypical when it comes to anybody that we normally know of is on the right. Like my views on things like like sex, for instance, are probably different from the average conservatives. But setting that aside, it's like, um, I think we're preoccupied too much with, well, we have been preoccupied too much with some of the particulars of the of our what we call the spectrum
The
of
left-right paradigm.
yeah,
Yeah, as I
exactly, yeah,
like to say.
yeah. I think the moment we kind of get a little bit past that, and instead of trying to fit in somewhere, just having one's own ideas, I think we'd be in a somewhat better situation. But I suppose, as they say, the die is cast right now, especially with recent events. So I think some of those differences are going to be brought to the forefront, I think. And
Unless we
yeah,
see a significant change, I unfortunately believe political violence is going to become more common over the next few years and decades in Western countries. And to make
hmm
it very clear, and I've made this very clear in the past, I absolutely reject all forms of political violence. Politics in in Western democracies and so forth, we've had peaceful exchange of power, we've had peaceful discourse and so forth. Introducing violence into this is going to destabilize the countries and potentially make them more autocratic in the future. So it's a really very worrying for me what we are seeing, and
right,
unfortunately I don't see it turning around anytime soon.
right,
I wish I could say I did.
that makes sense. Yeah, so I think this is watch your back kind of a situation, especially this goes even beyond with the Charlie Kirk thing. We had that murder on the bus of the Ukrainian refugee, and so we had that going on, and there's probably others that are not even being reported right now. So I think vigilance right now is something worthwhile, but in the meantime, I don't think this is a time to stop talking about ideas. I think more than ever, ideas are the first thing that are going to really make any kind of impact on any given situation. So we can't give that up. Um,
No,
we
freedom of
may,
thought,
yeah.
freedom of speech.
Mhm.
That's right.
Exactly, yeah. So so we need to, you know, coming from someone who wasn't previously a fan of Charlie Kirk, I think the best thing to do for the sake of his memory right now, if I might go in that direction, is to do what he did and talk,
Mm,
engage, and so
mm.
forth. So I think
Yep. Even
that's,
though
yeah, yeah,
even though yeah, didn't agree with him on some points, I think yeah,
mhm,
100% I have to say he was very much a talker.
yeah,
He always was willing to listen to other people's opinions, and he always made a space for
mm,
people to disagree
yeah,
with him. Yep,
yes.
100%.
And once again, I wish I'd appreciated that aspect a little bit more. Um, but uh, I guess that's the best I can kind of give justice to to this situation, I think.
I have so obviously I have Zoe McClellan. I don't know if you have any
Yeah.
final areas to talk. I have one small addition item I wanted to mention, but do you have
Okay,
any other items?
I don't think so. I think I've
Okay.
spoken my piece. I hope my point is well understood by whoever's listening to this one because it needed to be said, especially on this channel.
Yeah. I think so, but then people can always comment as well, and we can
Mm.
clarify if there's any need for
Yes.
that.
Hmm.
Something I learned about today or yesterday, I think it was just today actually, and it's a small point. Well, not really. It's a small news item, but it's actually quite serious. And I just wanted to raise it because soon when I learned about it, I checked and there's nothing in the mainstream media, even though it's actually a few months old. So it turns out the United States, of course, has the Securities and Exchange Commission, and I haven't mentioned this to Vernon at all, actually. So this is something just occurred to me to say now.
Okay.
Uh, there was a lawyer working for the Securities and Exchange Commission who lost their registration. The SEC lawyers have to be registered in a jurisdiction in the United States. Uh, or I think it can even be some of the overseas territories, but it has to be with one of the jurisdictions essentially under the control of the United States. And this lawyer lost their registration years ago, like 2010 or 2011 or something, and continued to practice as a lawyer working for the SEC. And this was a few months ago, and there's something on the SEC website about it, but the mainstream media hasn't picked up on this at all. I only saw a comment on X today, and I checked it, and it's true. Uh, and it seems quite serious to me, and it really calls into question prosecutions that lawyer may have been involved with on acting for the SEC. So it's really quite a serious issue, and it seems like they're not monitoring their own lawyers properly. Anyway, I just wanted to mention it to do my bit to just raise this concern because I think it is quite a serious issue when you've got an important organization like that having unregistered lawyers, practicing and prosecuting for them. So anyway, yeah. So hopefully the mainstream media does pick up on that now because I have seen it spreading a little bit on X and so forth.
All right.
And my last one is Zoe McClellan.
All right, let's go.
As of September 2025, a warrant is outstanding for the arrest of Zoe McClellan in relation to charges of kidnapping, child stealing, and child custody deprivation. McClellan is a public figure who has appeared in numerous popular television shows, including Star Trek Voyager, JAG, NCIS New Orleans, and Designated Survivor. Her face is familiar to millions. It is extraordinary that she has evaded detection for so long. McClellan was reportedly residing in an apartment in River Ridge, Louisiana in April 2021 and may still be residing in the area. McClellan grew up in the area of Port Orchard, Washington State, and may have returned to the area. Some sources believe that McClellan has left the United States and is residing in Canada or Costa Rica. Prior to disappearing, McClellan was known to use the alias Sarah Chandler. Anyone with any relevant information should contact the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office. Thank you.
Yep. See you next time.
Bye.